Hey everyone, sorry I've been rather short on content lately. I've decided to rekindle things using my amazing paint skills and by talking about the Lurker, which is a very popular Brood War unit that was ported into Wings of Liberty but never really used. I want to start by saying the overall anatomy of the Lurker isn't great. There's a very simple reason for this. When you're an animal that moves through substrates, and I believe in Wings of Liberty, the lurker actually can move well burrowed, similar to how a roach would. There's a problem with this. The rule, by and large, when moving in a restrictive environment, is that you want to streamline and simplify. So you don't want a lot of limbs sticking out that can get caught. There are some examples where the animal may be using their limbs for propulsion, but by and large, you're not going to see like a gigantic cephalic or head shield sticking out, um, just causing drag as you move through a substrate while you're sand swimming or swimming through blades of grass or whatever. So almost every single time you're going to end up with a body plan that's verging on something like a snake. That said, we can actually look at the anatomy of the lurker for what it is. So I'm going to start, as always, with the head, and the unit portrait isn't the best, unfortunately. It does give us some insight, though. It's got some interesting jaw structure, and I think they changed things since Brood War, so I'll have to cover the Brood War lurker in a different report, I guess. Anyway, it's got these lovely jaws that I do believe spread apart. Um, so this lower jaw here is similar to a snake, and this is to allow it to swallow prey that is potentially bigger than its head, which is a really awesome thing to have when you're trying not to stop and eat all the time. If you're going to be burrowed for long periods of time or whatever, you don't want to have to stop and eat and come out and reveal yourself. It's got these spindly little teeth as well, which suggests to me that the lurker may have some sort of a venomous bite in order to it has a double function in things like snakes, where you end up with the venom, and this actually is more so for spiders, but the venom not only inhibits the prey from moving or outright kills them, but it also sort of pre-digests the meal. It does have obviously another way of hunting with those lovely spines that stick out of the ground when it attacks, but this, it doesn't necessarily have to use them, though I suspect that would be the primary mode of hunting in a sit and wait predator. Another reason why you get this lovely jaw structure is that if you're hunting well burrowed or waiting for things to come by so you can ambush them, you really want to take advantage of anything that comes by, even if that is bigger than your head. So they do have these three small little eyes. They're not really the most important thing for the lurker, so they may be vestigial. The lurker pretty much doesn't function unless it's burrowed. So yeah, they're not the greatest, and as you can see, they don't actually stick above ground. Not a really big deal. I mean, they would be useful for if you're walking around, um, outside of your sort of home environment, which would be underground. Um, I do believe in Brood War that it did have a Hydralisk derp jaw, and it looked a lot more Hydralisky, but I'll cover that when I get to it. Okay, so zooming out a little bit, looking at the sort of body structure, it's got this really large spike coming out of its head with another one that's sticking out just over the cephalic shield. Again, these are not the greatest features to have. They this really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, some people will probably argue, yeah, it could be used to sort of poke its way through the soil or whatever, and that's fine and dandy, I guess, but I'm not a big fan. As far as the cephalic shield goes, this is sort of a really important feature for the lurker. The lurker has a whole bunch of spikes that you might say, oh, or they're great for defense or whatever. But if you don't have a part sticking above ground, why would you need defense like that? All it does, if you just burrow yourself as little as a meter lower, which for an animal this big wouldn't be a huge thing. You're going to end up with this just being wasted. It's going to cause drag as you swim through the soil, and it's just going to be extra developmental cost, which would be minute, but if you're making, millions of lurkers, that would actually start to add up. If it's meant to be taking any sort of fire, though, it does make sense to have kind of a big cephalic shield, like sort of like what we saw with the Ultralisk, where you have this big chunk of armor that's able to take a little bit of punishment. And I believe that the Lurker, it's not a glass cannon by any means, so that aspect really does make sense. It's got these lovely two front arms here, and I do believe they're arms and not sort of mouth parts or anything. And this would probably be just to help it swim through the soil and for any sort of prey manipulation that needs to happen. It's kind of got a weird body plan as you move backwards. Underneath this big cephalic shield is probably a little bit more squishy. As you can see, there's a little bit more, red jointed parts here. And you end up with a rather unique body plan where it's actually it's almost radial. It's kind of like I don't even know how to describe it. It's got 5 limbs, and there's sort of bilateral in the first 4. But this back one could be a repurposed tail, or it could be a legitimate third limb coming off of the back limb girdle here. It's really hard to determine, but I actually like that. It's rather unique, and if you're swimming through soil, you'd be able to tuck these behind you. As you can see, they all probably fold back, and that is a really good feature to have, to be able to sort of tuck in your limbs while you're swimming through a restrictive environment. What I don't get is on all of the joints, they have what appears to be 3 spikes coming off of them. Again, this is just, extra design, not really needed. Just sort of there to make them look like a badass. And I mean, honestly, the Lurker's a badass without it. So I don't get it, but I do like the limb setup regardless. And there's actually a nice little piece of armor that's covering this sort of posterior most leg. So one thing that a lot of people are probably wondering about is how the Lurker sends out spines. And honestly, I don't know. I think that that's rooted very firmly in science fiction, and I don't think there's much grounding to it. However, with that in mind, we can do our best to figure it out. So basically, it moves in a way that you kind of, in Wings of Liberty at least, it sticks up one and then another and then another and another, and they don't disappear or retract until it's fully deployed, and then it pulls them all underneath. So how this could potentially work, I'm not seeing really anywhere where these huge spikes, could be coming from. As you can see here, I mean, all the big spikes on the cephalic shield are, they're in place. Imagine these spikes were coming down this way. These spikes don't actually move when it attacks. So these are all sort of inert, and they don't provide any ability to shoot forward, I guess. I could see this horn kind of, as you can see, it's got more what appears to be flexible tissue. I could see this shooting forward and coming up underneath like this, but again, I don't see how it would have multiples coming up. Yeah, really, it's really cool looking, but it ultimately doesn't work. And that makes me sad because I was really hoping that I could figure out a way with which this could work, but apparently not. So anyway, that's the Lurker. I'm gonna see if I can get another one done today. I'm gonna also do maybe a couple write-ups, I'm not sure. But again, leave questions, comments, all that stuff below. Thanks.